so now like the big question then is this, like how do we consolidate? We're talking about culture of who we want to be on paper into how we behave like every day. There's a huge discrepancy oftentimes. This is not true everywhere, but like one of my biggest things in human services is that there's always this really great um mission, vision, and values. It's well thought out. I'm sure consultants were brought in to create this really flowery language, and that doesn't translate to the work that's being done. Again, there's a difference between like, here's the strategy, here's the intention of what we want to do, and that's not necessarily trickling down to what's being done.
Right.
And the worker is the one that's feeling the pinch because they're like, yeah, they told us this, but then my supervisor calls me in to talk to me about that. And so for me, like, how do we bridge the gap between the intention and the implementation in a meaningful way, not a performative way?
Right.
And so like the example that immediately comes to mind is if I'm saying that we are a an organization that is collaborative, and at the lowest levels people don't talk to each other, then how do we change that to be more collaborative versus it's us versus them, like, ooh, we don't talk to that team, right? Or, oh, must
Hmm.
be nice to work over here because you only answer phones, whereas I'm over here chained to this desk. Like, if collaboration is the culture or the again part of the mission, vision, and values, how do we bring that to life in real life at all levels, not just at the higher levels, but at the lower levels, and really get the buy-in? And I think it has to happen at every single level, but there has to be, again, accountability, there has to be reinforcement and redirection, not punishment, but redirection, and the removal of the discrepancies of, again, what you say to do. What, again, the one I always think of is initiative. On almost every performance evaluation I've ever seen, it has a measurement of takes initiative.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because a lot of times if you do something that's outside of what we already do, who said you could do that? Where does it
Hmm.
say in the policies and procedures? What's the best practice? Right? Where did you learn that from? Who gave you permission? It might be something that could change the trajectory of the work. But if you're saying we measure you on taking initiative, but don't do anything unless you're told to, then what's the culture going to be? It's going to be the thing that person gets the feedback about, like, who told you you could do that? I'm not taking initiative anymore because it's not rewarded, it's punished.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how the behavior is going to show up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
That's how the behavior, you say you want results, you want initiative, but whenever I stick my hand out, it gets slapped.
Right.
So,
Right.
then what it kills engagement, it kills that initiative, right? And I'm going to show a quick graphic real quick, that really highlights that, and it's you see there with thinking about there's parallel paths here, right? We have our mission, vision, and values, right? Where and the vision is where we want to be, right? And end childhood hunger, or healthy, or work and health for all families, right? And then the mission is how we get there, right? What are we going to do? How are we going to do? What are our practices to get that done? And then our values, right? So what's important to us, which will help guide us in that journey, right? But then, you have the strategy of how we're going to accomplish it with those specific goals, usually stats, right? And then objectives to meet those goals. And then we have activities that we create. And so they should have results, right? As opposed, and then on the other side, you have the culture of how we do it, right? Strategy is what we do, the culture is how we do it, right? So that's where the values come in, right? How are we caring for our folks? What is the focus of our work, right? Practices. How are we carrying that out, right? How are we showing up? Not just saying what we're going to do, but actually showing up in a way. that's, you know, focused, that's customer focused, that's employee focused. And then those behaviors will show up. If we have a culture where we truly have accountability, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, accountability is I'm accountable for my work and I'm accountability for what's going to happen, which means I'm accountable for my other folks, everyone else too. If somebody's sick, I'm taking care of their clients and they've set me up to be able to take care of them in a good way. I can find information about them. We can have conversations. I can call over to somebody who has the same client and not have it go straight to voicemail because I'm one of those people, right? So because we recognize if we're client centered, if we're customer centered, customer over, it's not about us and how we feel. If it's about what the client needs, right? And so if that's a value, then we'll practice that and our behaviors will show up and it'll get to results. But both of those are parallel paths that we have to take to be able to get to those results, right? And I tell stories all the time about, I had a client one time who she when she came to us, she had just uh, left another state and had brought her kids with her. She moved back home. She got a restraining order from her husband, and it was, excuse me, I need some honey before I tell the story. And and she was ready to go. She was interested in doing something, but she didn't know exactly what she wanted to do. She was living with her mom, and and we talked, and she was in her 40s, but she had never had a W-2 job,
Mhm.
right? But she had been doing taxes for 20 years for her husband's friends, and she had gone to computer school in the meantime, and she got a real estate, like she actually got a real estate license, didn't do anything with it, but had a real estate license, right? So she's definitely capable, right? Excuse me. And so we were, you know, in in our county, we're a work first county, which means, the first thing you have to do is a job search before the job search unlocks the rest of the um, uh, benefits that we can provide, right? And assistance we can provide. And she looked at me and she said, I've never been on a job search. I don't know what a job search looks like. If you send me on a job search right now, I'm going to fail. What I really need is, I just got out of this relationship, and a controlling and abusive relationship. Is there any type of mental health services you can provide where we can have some type of assistance in that way? And, I said, well, unfortunately, this is the first, the job search unlocks things like mental health services, right? And I just don't know. And she looked at me, and her demeanor totally changed. I knew if we were going to put her in a job search, she was going to fail. And, she had 5 kids living in 2 different houses with 2 different sets of grandparents, right? And so I went back to my, and the process would have been, nope, put her in a job search, right? And I went back to my boss and asked her, I let her know what happened. And I said, is there anything we can do? I mean, I know about the upfront activities, but is there anything we can do? And my boss, and I love her to death, and she said, I don't know, but let me ask. Right. This is, the worst they can say is no, but it sounds like this person has a specific need. Is there somewhere we can help them? And so she asked, she ran it up the flagpole, and right. And management found a way to work around the requirements that were there from CalWorks, and was able to find a way where Medi-Cal would take care of the assistance with the mental health. And she ended up getting joining women's empowerment groups for 3 years, for 3 months, and had a case management process for 3 months, and with the mental health department. And eventually she was feeling more capable, so that the next time I talked to her about a job search, it wasn't just an abject terror. It was, I don't know how to do it, can you help me? That's not what she was saying the last time, right? There's a difference between I don't know how to do it, I'm going to fail, and I don't know how to do it, can you show me how? Right. And I
But see
thought that
that
was,
Yeah.
So
Yes.
courageous for her to say, I don't know. Can you show me how many people ask for help, right? So in those 3 months, the it wasn't an exemption, it was a good cause, but because it was out of CalWorks regulations, those good cause, it when it was read, if that case was read, it would be marked as a negative against your own performance. And somehow in those 3 months, that case got read twice and it affected my performance. I'm not sure how. I don't think somebody was happy about it somewhere in the decision-making process. But eventually that person ended up getting a job and is, last time I heard it is doing really well and it is in realty and been doing, exceptionally well. But if we would have just followed that process, that might have been a family that just fell to the wayside or whatever else could have happened, right? Because there's a lot more to the story, but I mean,
Right.
I mean, that's really that fork in the road moment of my boss saying, rather than saying, this is the policy we have to follow, she said, let me ask, right? And whoever she asked was able to say, let me ask, how can we make this happen? Right. And that's the level of care. That's the level of, if we really want that idea of who we're serving, right? So if we want that culture, if we want that end result, that vision of families, being self-sufficient, what are some things that have to go into how we provide services for them, not just the availability of services or how many services. A lot of people, they focus on how many services that are available, but what about how those services are approached? How are they connected, right? How are people connected to them as to how this is going to help you? Right. We used to have that conversation with our workshop. We used to tell our workers, look, you guys, if you want your clients to show up, tell them what's the benefit of this class. We made brochures. We gave them we had some people sit in the class and watch it and say, this is what's happening during the class. It's up to you guys to let your clients know how this is going to be a benefit rather than they're just sitting in a class for 3 weeks. No, once they get there, they'll see the benefit, but they got to get there,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Well, I'm gonna tell you your story pissed me off, Carl. Your story hella pissed me off. I'm fuming right now. And you know why I'm fuming?
why?
I'm fuming because there is this culture in human services. This is not just unique to one county, at least in California, but there's this thought of process over people. It happens all the time. We hear stories of it all the time. The fact that you had to go ask permission and they had to ask permission and it went up 3 slots on the organizational chart to get permission to get somebody the help that they needed and had to advocate for it is what pisses me off. Like, at what point do we say, this is the culture that we're here to help people in the way that they need it? Here's what's available. Here's what we can do. Let's get people to the right place at the right time. And I want to give you the decision making power. You, the one that's face to face with that client, when they're being vulnerable and they're sharing and they're saying, this is what I need, that you don't have to jump through hoops to get them connected to the right place because we decided at a high strategy level we need to get people to get a job, but we're not going to give them what they need to be able to be ready to have a job. Like, it pisses me off. It frustrates me beyond repair. And the people that are doing the work feel that every single day, and that goes to the customer as well because they're here like, oh, you gave me this brochure that says all of these great things and I can't access any of them until I jump through your hoops or do the little dance that you need me to do. I'll just suffer by myself. Right now, we're talking about this from a human perspective, human services perspective, but how many times does it happen in any organization, a for-profit organization, a corporation, um,
Mm.
Target, Lowe's, where they're like, the customer's number one, but we're going to make it really difficult for you to use our services or the return policy. We're going to decide, oh, you can return anything, just not that. Where we're not equipping people with the decision making ability to do what they need to do at that transactional space, or we tell them again, customer service is number one, take care of the customer. And now a month later, I'm like, Carl, how come you put that person in mental health and didn't put them in job searching? And now you have to justify the decision that you made. And so next time you're like, you know what? That was a lot of drama for me. I don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation about not doing the right thing. So I'm just going to follow the script regardless of the impact. That's
Yeah.
how culture is built, is those individual
Mhm.
conversations or reinforcements that shape, like, I don't want to have another drama conversation, so I'm just going to do what I'm told. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to think outside of the box. I'm going to do exactly what I'm told, nothing more, nothing less. And at the end of the day, then we're looking at results going, how come nothing's changing? Because you've created that culture where people aren't allowed to think for themselves. They can only do what they're told.
Yeah.
And then they get pissed off like me and they leave and they go do something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's a shame. There's so many people who are passionate about the idea of helping people and get shit on every day for helping
Mhm.
people when that's
Mhm.
exactly what they're getting told what to do. I'm all fired up right now. I need to take,
Yeah.
I get so irritated with this idea because it's like, what do you want? What do you want to do? What's the goal? And I'm gonna go, well, let me do this on an academic level and not on a pissed off level. Um, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Mhm.
Great book. He's got a couple of good one-liners in there that really resonated with me. But one of my favorite ones is, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your systems is your culture, right? And so it's not just what you want, but it's like, what do you do? And then he has another one that says your current systems are perfectly designed for your current results. And so whatever you're doing now is giving you the results that you have now. And so if you don't like the results, then you got to change the systems, the habits, the culture. And it's not going to change overnight. Absolutely. I think the first step, like for companies, for organizations, for leadership, for managers, for supervisors, for line staff, for customer, for everybody, is to decide, like, who do we want to be? Who do I want to be? What's the goal? That's the goal. Like, set the direction. What do I want to be and who do I want to be? So, do I want to be an organization that cares for people? Do I want to be an organization of service? Do I want to be an organization of results? Do I want to be an organization of, a prosperity? Like, you can go any direction here. So once we kind of set, like, here's the ideal, the mission, vision, and values. Now that part's done, great, fantastic. You've earned your paycheck. But the most important thing is, now, how are we going to do it? And the way that James Clear describes it is like, we have to set an identity of who we are. And then those individual behaviors have to support that identity. So
Yeah.
if I'm saying, like, we're an organization that takes care of people, which again, a lot of human services organizations, that's the type of language that they have on their mission and vision. We take care of people, thriving communities, self-sufficiency. If we're going to say that, the next question that we're going to have to ask is, when we're setting up policies and procedures and direction and how we give feedback, and how we reinforce behaviors, then we have to ask, how is it in line with who we are? And if I say we're a company or we're an organization that prioritizes service, then when we look at our policies and procedures, we say, how is this in service to the client? So in the example that you gave, I would say, how is putting people into job search right away to unlock all of the other great services that could be useful, by putting them in job search first, how is that in service to the customer? And if the answer is it's not, then it's not the right direction. It's not the right direction. And we have to take ownership of that and say, how do we stay in line with, like, again, we're government. You always have, like, compliance, but how can you be flexible in that? Like, the state rules are not as rigid as counties make them out to be. They have their own, like, this is what we do, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
flexibility in those rules where we can say, how can we use these rules in service, if that's the thing that's important to us, so that people can get what they need? And we always have to put the people over the process. And oftentimes we don't we don't reward people over process. We reward process, 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 even if it's not giving you, if it's not living up to your vision or your culture, whatever you'd like to say. But that's the focus. And that's why I get so pissed off. Okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath and let you take over, Carl.
Well, just think about um what you mentioned. Another thing that Clear says, he says your actions reveal how badly you want something.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when if your mission is to promote sustainability and healthy families, how bad do you really want it? And what does that mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so what is your interpretation of that? Right. We've had different interpretations over, history, right? The ideas of, broken homes, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
60s, the federal government was able to come in and take Black and Native kids away from their families from broken homes. That meant that there wasn't two parents in the family, right? That was the justification to remove children and put them into foster care, right?
Right.
So that was policy, right? So, I mean, think about policy. We have this hard word. It's policy. We have to follow policy. Who creates policy? People create policy. Where does
Yep.
where do people? And so it's people's opinions. It's people's beliefs. It's people, you know, saying this is what we want and this is how we're going to do it. So people have different interpretations of what is important, right? And what is the end goal. And so it's really important to go back to that perspective. Some of us we find comfort, like the scarf thing, right? The
Mm-hmm.
certainty, in terms of the rules. We follow the rules, and this is the way that the rules have always been, and this is how it is. And we hear that. And I just had a leader the other day, well, last week say, if we sit there and say we want, a vibrant and up-to-date workforce and leadership, group, but yet, we shout down people who, come up with new ideas and tell them they need to conform, then how are we ever going to get any better? How are we ever going to get to coming up with any new and dynamic ideas? And it's just a circular, thing where we're just going to do our jobs rather than really make a difference. And in public service, your job is to make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the thing, right? In public service, it's not to maintain the status quo, it's to improve, the what we are able to provide our citizenry, right? And so it's such a challenge, right? And so just thinking about what is the end goal here? What are we trying to do? Right? Are we trying to hit the numbers? Are we trying to check a box? Okay, yeah, and some people that's who they are, and that's how they can, focus on results and improvement. We've seen improvement. We've seen an increase, right? Or we've seen so many people are in this class. Okay, so many people are in this class. What do they do with the class? All right. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of that class? How do you evaluate that it was worth it to him?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's just like, it's, I mean, as trainers, what happens? We get the assessments at the end of the class. Oh, they're so nice, they're so funny, or I didn't connect with them or anything else like that, right? And some classes may have a pre and post test, right, where we learn, right? So level one is, do they like the class? Level two, do they learn anything? Level three is, are they applying what they're learning? How often do we ever get to level three? In life, how often do we ever see if people are actually utilizing what it is that we've taught them, that we say is important, demonstrate, you know, how it's important? How often do people really get a chance to utilize that, and to make that a practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's so
Mm-hmm.
it's such a dance, and it's frustrating.
Well, it definitely is, but I think this goes back to like the accountability of leadership. I know that I'm sure you get this as well. Like I get some pushback in some of the classes. I tend to be a bit progressive in terms of let's not keep doing it the way it's always been done. I'm not like let's not change for the sake of change, but our system is obviously
Mhm.
broken. And so when we think about like, okay, what are some new ideas? How do we move into 2024 One of the phrases that just really makes my hair itch is like, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it. Oh, congratulations. It sucks, right? Move on. That's the way you've always done it, but are you getting the outcomes that you want? If you're not, then it's not the right way. It's comfortable, it's wonderful, but it's not working. So stop it, right? Try
Mhm.
something else. Maybe you'll get it right, maybe you'll fail. Who knows? We'll figure it out. I know the people who love certainty. They're like, I want it to be certain and predictable, even if it's dysfunctional. At least I know this dysfunction. So I'm comfortable there. But
Right.
with that being said, I get a lot of feedback from people saying, this training is great. This is fantastic. I can apply this at home. I'll never be able to apply this at work. And I always said, well, tell me more about that. Why our management wouldn't support this? And I'm like, your management picked the class.
Mhm.
Your management picked the class. They're the ones that told us, come in and teach these people this skill. Why would you not think that you could apply it in the workplace? And they're always like, well, if I do this, then my supervisor might say. And so my question, or kind of like my, I guess, good or bad advice, however you want to look at it, is sometimes you got to do the right thing, even if it gets you the wrong attention. And like be willing to take a little bit of heat. And I say I spend a lot of time in the principal's office, and I really do. Um, I really do. But part of like my value system and part of my beliefs and my personal culture is to challenge the status quo. I'm not afraid to have a candid conversation with my director. I'm not afraid to have a candid conversation with a coworker and a colleague. And again, sometimes that's a good thing and we make real progress. Sometimes it closes a door for me. And when those
Mhm.
doors do close, I'm like, lock it, right? Because if you're not going to be accountable to information, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying here's some information if the impact of what we're doing or how it's impacting me or how it's impacting the next person. What can you do with that? And then I get this condescending explanation about, oh, well, this is this and that's that. Like, you kick rocks. Like, I don't want to hear, don't tell me why. Like, are you open to thinking about this in a different way? I don't want an explanation. I want, like, tell me a little bit more about why this is the practice. I don't need the necessarily history, but how does it make sense? How does it fit in with what we're trying to do here? And I almost never get a straight answer. It's the
Yeah.
politicking, right? It's the politicking. Dance around the answer. We're never going to tell you. So I'm not going to let you get away with that. I'm going to keep pushing, pushing, pushing until finally they're like, do you want to talk? Person? No, I don't. I'm kind of over it now at this point. It's like we have to be willing to advocate, but at the same time, leadership cannot take it personal when other people have different ideas that challenge what they already believe to be true. Because like you mentioned earlier, if I come in and I say, you know what, I have this different idea, or what about this approach, or what about this, or I thought about that, and they're like, no, 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 that's not going to work. I'm not going to keep coming to you with my great ideas, and now you miss out on the gift of my work and my experience. And at the end of the day, what does that do to the environment? It again puts us back into results and processes. I'm not willing to do the right thing because I keep getting the wrong attention.
Yeah.
And that's confusing. Again, it's confusing for people, and it doesn't have to be that way. I will not subscribe. I will not subscribe to the idea that, oh, it's just too hard to let people have their own ideas and to go their own way. We've got to have structure. You do have to have structure. I agree. There has to be structure and there has to be process. But if it doesn't support the vision, if it doesn't support the culture of who we're supposed to be, then your structure and your process is trash.
Yeah.
Sorry to say, it's trash. And you have to take some ownership for that and think of a different way. I always go back to the grippy model. I don't know if you know the grippy model,
I know.
which I think
Yeah.
there was a missed opportunity there for get a grip, I think is what it should be. But it's an
Yeah.
acronym: goals, roles, processes, interpersonal relationships. And when I like to imagine it, I like to imagine it like a picture frame because the goals, the roles, the processes, the interpersonal relationships, they're all there connected to each other. But in the middle is the vision of what the organization should be. And so everything supports the vision. So the goals support the vision. The roles support the vision. The processes support the vision. The interpersonal relationships support the vision. And if any of that's untrue, the whole thing is going to fall apart and that vision is never going to be achieved. I can't sit here and say, we're an organization built on respect, but I'm going to be super disrespectful every time I talk to you. It doesn't, the math is not mathing, Carl. The math is not mathing. And that's, again, I get super passionate here. I just get myself, I spray myself with some water. Simmer down, Tiff, simmer down.
No, I totally get what you're saying. Absolutely. And that, and if anybody's interested in the GRPI model, it definitely is an important model that you can look at in terms of, how your team is doing, how they're performing, right? It's an assessment. There's actually an assessment that's connected to it where you can just answer some real simple questions. I think it's like 10 questions. Just ask questions about how your team is doing, and then you can do a self-assessment and have a conversation about it, just so we can see it there, right?
Ooh, mind mapping. Mind mapping.
Yeah. So this is GRPI here, where it talks about, as you mentioned, the goals, roles, processes, interpersonal, and all the different components of, each one of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
But what you need, we need to be clear of what our goals are, what our roles are, right? What our processes are, what, our intent for interpersonal relationship, the way that we communicate. We have to be in agreement, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be 100%. I agree with you in everything, but I'm on board. I'm in alignment, right? And effectiveness, that we've seen that this works, that we know that this works. And if something isn't working, how do we fix it so that it can work, right? But how often do we see people not even getting to that level of clarity? It's just decisions that are being made above our pay grade, and hey, we just have to deal with it, right? And
Yeah.
if leaders aren't accountable to their staff, then you're going to have people that are saying, yeah, well, do they agree with it, or that's what they want? When have they been down here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or, you know, how is this supposed to be applicable to what we do?
Mm-hmm.
And so be able to communicate that, and to know that we have defined roles, we have defined processes are definitely important. But, you know, what what can we do within those processes? How can we color within the lines? You give me I'm fine with boundaries. I think they're important. But, give me a pen and let me figure out how to work within those lines, within those boundaries, to make that work for people, right?
Will
But
you put that graphic? Yeah, will you put that graphic up one more time? Because I just had
sure.
a random thought. I've never thought this thought before, so I'm gonna think it out loud. You all are gonna hear it
Okay.
at the same time I am.
Here's
What I noticed about this GRPI model is this. This almost identically follows the disc like values. Goals are most important, I'm going to think, to D's. Roles will be most important to the S's. Processes for the C's, the interpersonal for the I's. And so I think, like, as leaders, when we're looking at this, depending on your style, you're going to focus on one of these more than another. Like if I'm a C leader, I'm going to focus so much on processes, I may not think about interpersonal relationships. If I'm an I might focus so much on relationships, I might not set good goals. If I'm looking at an S, I might be really thinking about the roles and who's going to do what. Is it fair? Is it, are we putting the right people in the right places? Is it going to cause conflict? And so we may not be thinking about what those processes are. I'm just thinking this out loud for the first time, but what's missing from this particular image here, which again, I love the way it's broken down. I love the mind mapping. But the thing that's missing here is that GRPI has to be connected to the culture. Because if the interpersonal goals, roles, and processes are not connected back to, again, who are we as a team, as an organization, then it's always going to be a dysfunction, always. And as leaders, we have to be aware of our own like preferences, because chances are we're going to lean on our own preferences, and that might leave some gaps in the other places that are going to be necessary to be able to support the culture. Because I can say, here's how I want us to get along as an I, like here's how I want us to talk to each other, here's the way I want us to have relationships, because that's important to me. But if I'm not putting processes in place for people to be able to do the work, and I focus so much, there's going to be a gap in the culture, because now I might be creating conflict because we don't have a process. We don't have consistency and clarity in the process. So again, I don't know. What do you think? I just, my brain started moving right now, and my coffee kicked in finally.
Well, Tiff, I'm gonna do something that I don't think we've ever done in
Ooh,
this podcast.
ooh.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with you. Dun,
What?
dun, dun. Right. Yes.
Keep it real, Carl. Come on, keep it
All right.
real.
So me as an S, I think I connect more with the interpersonal, right?
Mm-hmm.
The S's are those, more of the intimate one-on-one relationship type of folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So building that trust, engendering that openness, right? Which I know the more that someone trusts me and is loyal to me, they're going to perform for me better, right? Those folks that I am loyal to, I'll run through a brick wall and I will hate to let them down, right? And so interpersonal communication, that's important to me. I do agree that the roles area is a personal piece as well, but I think that's more for eyes like you who are
Maybe.
able to communicate, this is where we're going. Come on, guys, so to muster the troops, right? It's that general who leads from the front, but as identifying, this is where you are, this is your responsibilities, this is our reporting structure, right? And so we want to communicate, we have to communicate to the larger group of folks, right? And so that's how I see it. That's the only difference I see. But I dig your, I've never seen it that way, and I dig the way that I'm picking up what you're putting down, man.
When I first was thinking about it, I actually thought the way that you think. And I hate to tell you that you're right, Carl, but I did think of it that way. And the reason that I flip flopped as it came out of my mouth is the reason I put I with interpersonal and S's on roles is that because I's put such a priority on relationships, S's do as well. But I think the value of I's is from how they get along with people, and that they know everybody everywhere, that they're very hot and heavy on the networking. But S is like stability, and I think that's why I chose roles, because they want to know where do they fit into the big picture to not make waves. They do rely on relationships. Roles is very related. Interpersonal and roles very relationshipy. Process and goals very task related. And that's where I made that connection.
Yeah.
So I can see your point as well, Carl. And I thought almost the same thing, but I swapped because
Yeah.
I do think that the interpersonal relationships are important, but I think what S's really value is the structure in the relationships as well, and making sure that they stay in their lane to not disrupt anybody, but they are very relationship heavy for sure.
Cool.
All right, thanks. Thank you
This
for putting that back up.
yeah, this is one where I am happy for us to agree to disagree, because I
Oh,
think we're on the same page, right? It's just, we're seeing it in different ways. But that's an example of the type of conversation that leads to ingenuity. I mean, I don't know if the grippy folks have ever connected with the disc folks, and maybe they should. Maybe we should connect that. Maybe we should do that, right? But
it feels like a lot
yeah,
of work.
yeah.
No, I,
Well, which
I,
is one of the issues that you hear about. Well, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of man hours, and how are we going to make that work, right? So that's definitely a challenge, right?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, well, I don't know if the county leadership or board of supervisors will approve it, or I don't know if we run it up the flagpole, and will this bureau accept it, and things like that. And there's all this. We work in fear, right? We work in the universe of um, measurement, right?
Mhm.
And I learned about this in a course coaching course I'm taking this weekend about the universe of measurement as opposed to the universe of possibilities,
Mhm.
right? And we are focused constantly, especially if you're task focused, you're focused on measurement, what we know, what we can see, what we can prove, and what we know to be the limits of our abilities. And those folks who, seem to push those barriers, and the inventors and the people who are moguls and people who create things, you know, they see those measurements not as limits, but as markers of where we can go past, right? But how many of us say, no, these regs are hard and fast. This is the policy. This is what we need to follow. This is what we've known. There's certainty there. I'm comfortable here. I know what this looks like. You're asking us to think about something that's completely different. And, you know, I don't know what that looks like. And we see it, even in how people talk about, younger generations always, right? You always see how the younger generation is, always, you know, shit on, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, by other generations. And I always tell people, well, I mean, how many generations have said kids these days?
Every
Probably every
generation.
generation in human existence, right? And so, the guy who invented, or the person, it could have been a woman for all I know, the person who invented fire said, oh, I need to invent, I need to create something warm because, my kid over there, they're so soft, they can't handle the cold, right? So I mean, how often do we limit ourselves by what is on paper, or what has been done, what practices have been applied? And just think about, and I've said it before in this podcast. Well, I didn't have this one-on-one conversations when I was coming up, and my supervisor didn't do that with me, and I'm doing fine. Well, yeah, well, me too. But now that I know that that's something that's important, and neuroscience in the last 30 years have told us it's important, I wish I would have had it. That would have been great for my development. I mean, I came to it at an older age. It would have been great to have it at a younger age. And so, our kids these days that are asking for it, that are looking for it, and that are deciding where they want to stay and put forth their effort and work, where they're getting that support, where they're getting that ability to be counted as a contributor and as a valid equal peer, right? Rather than a kid
Mhm.
who doesn't know anything, right? If that's been the culture that we've had, then guess what? These kids they're not going to necessarily stay, right?
Yeah.
And so, how are you going to keep this culture of how we've always done things? Guess what? You do always you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got.
Yep.
Right.
These poor kids, we were all kids that didn't have life experience at some point. You know what I mean? Every single the only way, at least I'm gonna just speak for myself. I've only become so smart and wise from doing everything wrong at least 17 times. I'm a slow learner. I like to learn things the hard way. It's funny because my youngest son, he's 22. You can give him like the most sage advice, like, this is what's going to happen if you do that. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he does it the hard way. And I can't even be frustrated with him because I'm like, he kind of is just like his mom, he's got to do it the rough way before he figures it out. But I also have like great hope because he is so hard headed. He will learn all of those lessons. And by the time he's my age, he's going to surpass me, because he's going to do it wrong 74 times. Because he's an overachiever. He's got to get it wrong more times than I did. But nonetheless, kids, the younger generation, and they're not kids, they're young adults. Most of the new working generation, they're young adults. I think the
Yeah.
thing for them that's most important is that they want their work, their time to have impact. They want it to have purpose. And as we look at like the older leaders, and we're in that generation, but as we look at like Gen X boomers, even some of the elder millennials, there's been such a focus on productivity and measurement as a way of leading and managing. There's not a lot of leaders, by the way. There's a lot of managers, not a lot of leaders. there's so much focus on productivity and tasks that there's not enough conversation around purpose. And that's one of the reasons that it's hard for people to stay staffed, is because you can come in and beat into me how to do a job, but if it doesn't connect to something bigger, I'm not going to stay connected to it.
Yeah.
People will do hard stuff. People will do hard stuff if it's leading to an outcome. But I think that this next generation, I have so much hope for this next generation because they don't do things because they're told to, which really pisses us older people off. Like, we're telling you what to do, and they're like, do it yourself. But I love that energy. I love that energy because they will shape the future in ways that we could have never imagined. And I'm really looking forward to that revolution. It's starting. But
Mhm.
the main thing is this: we're not going to do things for the sake of doing them. If it doesn't have purpose, count me out. And I really love that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Hard to manage, but
Yes.
great for leaders, great for leaders. So
Mhm. Well, it's almost time for
the
some more
Vaporub,
of Vaporub.
get away from me. Get away from me.
Yeah.
Um, so can I don't know if you're up for this, Carl. I mean, you did agree to disagree with me earlier, which for me is usually fighting words, but I'm gonna let you have it because you're not feeling well. Um, yeah, you know what my favorite I don't love let's agree to disagree because what I always hear is shut up, you're never gonna see my side, so I don't want to talk about it anymore. But I
Mm.
learned one from Nora. You know what, Carl, you might be right. You
Yeah.
might be right, Carl.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the
Yeah.
end of the. You know what? You might
Mm.
be right, and that's it. I
Mm.
love that one. It feels better to me. So, Carl, you might be right. Um, but if it's okay with you, I have some questions for the audience for them to think about in regards to culture.
Yeah.
Maybe some tips, hot tips, some tips, burning
Tips
questions.
riffs. Yeah.
Tips riffs. We'll figure that out. We'll figure out what it looks like. But here are some questions for you to ponder if you are in a leadership position or you're maybe looking to influence the leadership wherever you are at. The first question is, does your culture and strategy align? And so really thinking about like what's the ultimate intentional vibe of of your corporation or company or organization, and does it align with again the direction that you're heading right now? So thinking about that. Another one for, especially for leaders, and this is a great conversation if you're not a leader to have with your supervisor or manager. This is a really great question to ask. What are the three most important things that define you as an organization? Like the three main things. So, is it productivity? Is it taking care of people? Is it profit? Again, this looks different for every organization, but can you articulate and can your management and your leadership articulate the three most important things that define you as a company? And it should be just one word answers. The third question I have is, how do you support the right thing um, to do it in a very accountable way? And how will you own your part in that? So, what I'm really asking here is, how do you support the right thing? Whatever your main things are, how do you make sure that those behaviors that support what's important to you are celebrated, are recognized, are reinforced? And how do you own your part when it goes wrong as a leader specifically? So, how do you own that piece of it? If you've got to give somebody feedback to change direction, how do you do that in a really respectful way and own your part in that? So, those are the questions I have, Carl, for you to points to ponder. Let's tips points to ponder. I don't know. We'll play with the words here. What do you think, Carl?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Great questions, And, always, just the overarching question for me is what's in it for you to create a culture that your customers and your staff enjoy
Mhm.
when they get up to come to work? I ask that question all the time in class. What gets you excited? What gets you motivated to come to work every morning? Right. And different people have different ideas, and usually they say money, but you know, but then, you know, coworkers, the environment, helping others, right? If you know, that's part of what it is that you're interested in, right? And it's not necessarily just the bottom line and keeping your job. You know, what else are you interested in doing and growing in your organization? What type of
Mhm.
organization do you want to grow? What would you like other people to say about your organization,
Mhm.
okay? About who you are and, you know, how you get things done.
Mhm.
So that's
I
the
know our
important
time,
thing for me,
yeah.
culture.
I know our time is almost up and well, it's been up, but we do what we want here. So, real quick, do you have like a personal like purpose statement or words like a Carl culture that you live by?
Yes. So, well, when I think of the idea of, you know, why do I do what I do? Right. You know, start with why, right? Simon
Mhm.
Sinek. And, you know, my job is to make a difference in the lives of people that I interact with on a daily basis in many different ways, right? So, you know, but really it's that idea of impact and making a difference. That's, you know, I'm constantly thinking about the things that I say that I do, and I don't always do them correctly. So, you know, when I'm corrected and shown that I can do better, it's knowledge, it's food, right? It makes me a better person, you know. But yeah, really my whole purpose is to make a difference in the lives that I impact on a daily basis. So yeah.
I have mine that I'm living my best life. That is my purpose. Living my best life, and that shows in like how I live and who I spend my time with, and my gift to others is to help them live their best life as well. And that's I think the magic formula there. Like, what does your best life look like, or what does your okay life look like?
Hmm.
You know, tomorrow's never promised, and I try to live every day like it might be my last one, you know? And that's why when I'm at Paisanos, I get the bocce balls.
YOLO.
YOLO! But I do want to live my best life, and I want other people to live their best life as well. Like my main goal in being an instructor and being a coach and being a friend and being a partner and all of the things, all of the different roles that I have in my life, um, is to just help people realize that life is not so serious. You know, we have to work, we have to be thinking about again culture, but like life doesn't have to suck. And how do you again do the things you have to do, but with some joy in it? And that's I think my purpose is living my best life, helping other people live their best life, and that's what keeps me moving every day. So so far so good, because let me tell you, I am living my best life, that's for sure.
Very nice. Right
For
on.
sure.
All
So
right. Well, no, thank you very much for that. You know, so we have those questions for you guys. If you want to respond, you can, you know, there's comments and the different platforms that you have. You can always leave comments. You can always leave your answers if you have answers, and we will respond to those. If you have any questions for us, if you ever have any questions, you know, one of these days, hopefully we have enough questions to do a mailbag type of segment where people
ooh,
just ask random questions. You know, feel free to do that, you know, but and also, oh yeah, I forgot. We have to, you know, we have give us ratings and likes and ring the bell and Spotify and all those other things. You know,
or topics
we
you
got,
want us to talk about.
yeah, yeah,
We
absolutely.
want to hear from you. We like I like you, Carl. You're cool and all, but I'd love to hear from some other people as well and see join the conversation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up this edition of Keeping It Real with Tiff and Carl. So I'm Carl.
I'm Tiff, and Carl, I hope you feel better.
Thank you. I'm definitely gonna try my best. Take
Rub
care,
that
everyone.
vapor rub all over your chest. Put some on your feet. And you'll be fine.
Babaroo time.
And if you say sana sana colita de rana when you do it, it works even better. That's what I heard. That's the word on the
and,
street.
and crack that egg. Yep. All right.
Crack the egg. Yep. All right. I'll see you next time.